All right, starting off with page number 1 and 2 in the inventory management portion of this seminar, section number 4, I want to address what we call the data elements relative to implementing the inventory management program. And I'm also going to provide you with some cross-references for some of these items that are also found in this section so that you could note the cross-references, which are going to be page numbers for the appropriate data element, to make it easier for you a little later as you go back through this notebook after you're through with reviewing the notebook and its associated tapes. Now, starting off with item A, we have the spare part number, we have the description, and C is the unit of measure. Those are 3 data elements that we will always use when we talk about the identification of a spare part. Item number D is the inventory classification code. Now, if you remember, I made reference to that inventory classification code earlier in section number 2. Make a note now that that code is shown on pages 5 and 6. Item E is the ABC code. Now, that ABC code starts on page 12. There are several pages, which is an integral part of the ABC development. On item number F, the cycle count frequency code, that is a date code which is a byproduct of the ABC analysis. So when we get into cycle counting, we will go through the development of the frequency code for you. G are the requirements by date, and I may also make note that they can likewise be by shift. So item number G, the planned, the unplanned, and the total requirements are going to be reviewed on page number 7. The on-hand is the total quantity on hand, irrespective of where it's located. That means if we have more than one storage area, then H, the on-hand, is the total of all on-hand inventories. I is the total of on-order. So if I have more than one outstanding purchase order, or if I manufacture the spare part and I have more than one manufactured order outstanding, then I is the summation of the total on order. J pertains to the repairs, and those repairs can be either internal through a maintenance work order system, or they can be done externally through the purchase order system. And in some cases, you may find, depending on volume, the same item could be repaired internally and likewise externally. So J3 represents the total repairs that are on order relative to the repair status. Now, the inventory control technique code, where we have the code number, the date the code was established, and who established the code, is going to be addressed on page number 9. The unit cost, L, is the actual purchase order cost, or it could be an average cost based upon your specific item costing system. M, the inventory carrying cost, is going to be reviewed on page 20, and the purchase order cost, item N, is going to be reviewed on page 21. The lead time is the lead time for the item, which is going to be different than the lead time that we will be using in the purchasing system. The lead time in the inventory management system is what we call aggregate lead time, which is the pre-purchase order time, It would also include maybe the purchase order time, the vendor lead time, transit from the vendor to me, receiving inspection lead times, and the lead time that it takes to actually put material bin on hand. In the purchasing section, the lead time that we review there or use there is strictly the vendor quoted lead time. Item P, the shelf life code, we're going to review that in section 5, page 14. And again, if additional information is required, then please feel free to add that information to this particular outline. So what we have discussed in pages 1 and 2 is the development for what I call spare part or other related items, the item master record data. Now, once we have developed this item data, then the question is, we're in a position to start implementing the inventory management program relative to tracking the requirements, usage, or demand, and then addressing the two questions, when should I order and how much should I order? But before we do that, we want to look at page number 3 and look at two key management issues relative to addressing inventory management. The first issue is the inventory policy, and the second issue is the utilization of the proper inventory technique to carry out that policy. So what I'm trying to accomplish here on page number 3 is to provide you with the formula that I identify inventory management as, and it goes like this. Inventory management is equal to the inventory policy plus the inventory technique to execute that policy. Who should be responsible to support and maybe develop inventory policies? Top management. And that's not only the top management of the maintenance operation, but it involves top management outside of maintenance, such as finance, maybe the chief executive officer, and likewise the input from operations. The inventory techniques is really the responsibility of the inventory management person or persons. Now, let's identify one important issue relative to staffing the inventory management activity. In a small company, and I identify a small company relative to craft size. If you have 20 or less craft personnel, then that's my identification of a small company. Inventory management and purchasing management can be done by the same individual. When we move to, let's say, a medium-sized company, would be 50 craft personnel down to about 21, then we may want to separate and have inventory management done by one person and purchasing management performed by another person. Again, everything pertains to volume. When we talk about a large organization, which is 51 and more craft personnel, we may have more than one person supporting both inventory management and purchasing management. Irrespective of the number of people in inventory management and purchasing management, it has been my experience, and it's my advice to you, to make certain that these people are properly trained and cross-trained so that they each understand the interrelationship between inventory management and purchasing management. You're going to have a more successful inventory and purchasing program if you follow my recommendation. Now, starting off on page 4A, we're going to address some of the key inventory policies. Let me identify these policies for you as I address each one. One is the inventory control technique to be used. Now, that is going to be an integral part of our ordering matrix, which we're going to be looking at shortly. The inventory levels for all commodities and classifications pertains to the inventory class code for classifications, or the family or commodity code for similar type items within a family. As an example, bearings is a family, AC motors is a family, DC motors is a family. Then we can get into hardware items as a family, plumbing supply items, and so forth. Item number 3 addresses stocking locations. Do we have a central storage area, or do we have decentralized? Either will work, but remember, the bin on hand that we use in the inventory management program is the sum of all inventory on hand, especially in a decentralized storage environment. Item 4 is the safety level, which we're going to review when we develop safety stock for future unplanned requirements, and that is really the input into the development of safety stock. So the things that we're going to combine will be the where used code that we talked about previously, the service level, the safety factor, which is a byproduct of developing the mean absolute deviation, and when we put them all together, we have a consistent way of developing safety stock for future unplanned requirements. Item 5 is the analysis of inventory turnover. And here we could have turnover by total on hand. We could have turnover by family. We could have turnover analysis by inventory class code, or we can have turnover analysis by individual part number. We're going to show you how to do all of those turnover analyses. Item number 6 is obsolescence policy, and in section number 3 we discussed not only the policy but also the procedures. Item 7 is the disbursement procedures and policies, and they are very easy to define. Nothing goes out of the storeroom unless it's recorded, and it must be recorded both on the inventory record as an issue, as a demand, but also recorded on the storeroom record, which reduces the bin on hand quantity by that disbursement quantity. Item 8 is cycle counting. We'll discuss cycle counting in this section. Remember, cycle counting is done every day. It's like a little mini physical, and it eliminates taking a physical inventory in the storeroom. As you start to do more and more planning and scheduling, your inventory level is going to start being reduced. And that reduction of inventory levels indicates to me, and I hope to you, that record accuracy must be at its highest, meaning 100% accurate. So cycle counting is going to support record accuracy, but more importantly, item number 9, security of the storeroom, is going to support inventory record accuracy. We have a definition of the storeroom. It's like your bank vault. Try and take something out of the bank vault without proper documentation. People have tried it, and you know where they're at today. It's called penal institutions. So the two things that are going to support record accuracy, not only in the inventory system, but in the storeroom, is 8, cycle counting, and 9, security. We also talked about the new part notice system earlier. It's a key requirement because as new items get added to the maintenance program, we have to develop the inventory management and the purchasing management data elements relative to how we're going to support the new item. Item 11 indicates the need for the engineering change notice system. And turning to page 4B, we want to talk about the counting equipment. That's a key requirement in the storeroom, and that could be balancing scales, ratio scales, or weigh scales. Item 13 is the implementation of receiving inspection. And 14 are the training programs that you want to consider in not only the storeroom, but the inventory and the purchasing area and other activities within maintenance management. We need material handling equipment to be identified as a requirement, and that is noted by item number 15. 16 is the proper storage facilities, and that addresses, as an example, the various bins, the racks, the shelving, the cantilevers, the file cabinets, and any other application which is required to properly house and support spare parts while they are in the storeroom. Item 17 addresses the second and or third shift support to make certain that as items are withdrawn from stores, the inventory record and the storeroom record integrity is maintained. 18 pertains to the shelf life program, which we're going to discuss in detail, and we have a need for receiving conversion capability, which is item number 19. And a very quick illustration, I buy one, that is on the purchase order, the unit of measure is 1 box of hacksaw blades. When I receive the box, I don't put 1 box away in stores. There are generally 10 hacksaw blades in a box. Therefore, I put 10 away. And one more illustration, I buy 1 spool of, let's say, 12 gauge, a solid copper red-coated wire. The spool has 300 feet on it. When I receive the receipt against the purchase order, I have a unit of 1, 300 feet. When I put that spool away in the storeroom, I don't put 1 away, I put 300 feet away. Therefore, the need for conversion capability. 20, extra security items are those items that have high value, they're very critical, and you may want to consider carrying those type of items in a separate secure area within the storeroom. Our term for that is a bonded crib. So therefore, people that can enter that bonded crib or that extra secure area must be bonded by a bonding agency, and that would require support, let's say, by your financial department, your chief executive officer, and also the human resource department. And item 21 pertains to the equipment and the supplies required for packaging, because if you remember earlier, we talked about maybe shipping directly out of the storeroom to a supplier, and those could be returned goods, or they could be items going out for, let's say, repair. So the storeroom is becoming self-contained. We receive inspection, we put away, we issue, and we also ship out of the storeroom. Now, item 22, again, is if you need additional information to enhance your inventory policies, please add them to this list. Pages 4A and 4B must be known by top management. We must have top management approval, but most importantly, top management support. And all of these policies pertain to one element: data integrity of the inventory, the purchasing, and the storeroom. Now, moving on to pages 5 and 6, I want to address the various inventory classification codes. As you're going to see, there are currently 18 inventory class codes that we have developed for many of our clients that we have provided management services to in the past. Class 1 is an item that is not an integral part of PM, major, minor overhaul. And Class 1 is an item that is not normally stocked by the vendor, which is indicated as A under 1. It has long lead time. It has unforecastable usage, which means you don't know when you're going to require it, but if you did, you better have it on hand because it could shut down a process, a major piece of equipment, or whatever. And as item E indicates, it's not readily substitutable. This type of an item we would probably manage under a min-max system. We would retain that item in maybe another secure area within the storeroom for what we would call critical Class 1 items. Class 2 would be those spare parts that are recommended by your OEM when you purchase equipment. Sometimes it is financially advisable to purchase spare parts at the same time that you're purchasing the equipment, especially if there is a quantity discount offered. And in this case, those items would go into the storeroom, but since they have not going to be an integral part of PM until the PM program has been established, we want to classify those items as Class 2 items. Now, theoretically, all of the other items would be Class 3, but that is a tremendously large classification. So the way I have addressed the balance of the class codes is as follows. Class 3 would be basically all of the other spare parts that are normally used by maintenance for both planned and unplanned requirements. But an integral part of Class 3 would be Class 4, which are safety stock items. And we're going to show you when we move into what we call our order point section within Section 4 Inventory Management. We'll show you how we can not only develop the safety stock independently, but the need for utilizing an independent classification code, such as Code 4 for safety stock. Now, moving forward to page 6, we have items that we're going to utilize vendor stocking programs in. Those would be Class 5. Bench stock or two-bin items under Class 6 are used for those parts that we're going to house in our various maintenance repair shops. Class 7 are vendor unit package quantities. When a vendor says you have to buy 8, because that's how many are in a package, as compared to item number 8, Class 8, which is the vendor minimum. And when you issue a purchase order, the minimum may be 10, and if you need 8, you're going to have to purchase 10. So that means you're going to have 2 items on the shelf pending further usage. The class code indicates why it's there. You have the shelf life items, which are item number 9 or Class 9. Then our extra security items are 10. Corporate stocking program items, that is where we have more than one facility combining its requirements. Those likewise would be recorded as class number 11. Blanket order items, which would be 12. 13 would be engineered project overages, that is excess inventory over and above your normal stocking level. Now those parts would be identical by part number what you carry in the storeroom. If engineering is going to give us parts that are not carried in the storeroom, I would not accept it, and those should be given to the engineers and let them determine who and how disposition is going to be made and who's going to approve it. And then we have item number 14, Class 14, which are consigned vendor items in. That means you don't own it, the vendor does, but it is our advice that your financial department has a insurance policy that would protect you financially if there were any loss of those particular items. And the same application holds true with Class Code 15, which pertains to contractor items. The contractor owns them, but all you're doing is you're going to house those items for a short period of time until the contractor actually uses them. Then 16 are the warranty approval items, management approval items, where let's say a purchase order is going to be equal to or above a predetermined level where management may want to approve the purchase order before it is actually released. And then 17 are those items that are part of the vendor certification program, which is really a purchasing department responsibility. And then 18 are warranty items. Now, let me just make a comment relative to the following potential question. Frank, is it possible that part numbers could have more than one inventory class code? The answer is yes. I could have an item where I may have both planned and unplanned requirements. The item would be classified as 3 and 4. So when you have items that do have more than one inventory class code, add additional class codes like 19, 20, and so forth, but indicate what those class codes are for. It is conceivable you could have 2 or more class codes for the same item. Well, rather than try and clutter up the item master record, stay within a 2-digit numeric number, but identify what those class codes are. Now, moving on to page number 7, we're addressing the planned versus the unplanned maintenance work order requirements. So page 7 actually is the first page of 5 pages, and we go from page 7 to 7D. So what I want to do at this point in time is address those orders that are part of planned versus those that are part of unplanned, and then we'll look at some of the other definitions, and then we'll look at 2 records showing you how those planned and unplanned requirements are actually recorded and used. The planned maintenance work orders are the PM, that is the preventative maintenance checklists, the minor overhauls, the major overhauls, facilities expansion, and projects. All of those are planned. That means I'm looking out into the future, and those future time periods could go 1 to 2 years in advance, especially if they are minor and major overhauls. Now, the unplanned maintenance work orders are identified as the emergency order, maintenance work order requests that will be converted over into unplanned maintenance work orders, but those could be scheduled. The standing maintenance work orders, one would be the bench stock or the 2-bin system to replenish, let's say, those parts that are housed in the maintenance repair shops. Others could be periodically, let's say, going through operations and looking for steam and water leaks. Also doing some painting on a non-planned basis. Periodically, I may, let's say, take the scuff marks off of walls and heavily traveled aisles, things along that nature. And then you get the miscellaneous requisitions that are from, let's say, non-operational personnel, but may come from different departments within the organization for some type of maintenance support. Now, moving on to page 7A, we're going to look at 2 different inventory records which demonstrates the need to record both planned, unplanned, and total requirements. First of all, I want to address the 4 different nomenclatures that are on the left-hand side of both records. PD is the period, okay, and those are shown at the bottom left-hand side on this exhibit. P are the planned requirements, U are the unplanned requirements, and T are the total requirements. Now, for the top record, part number 23144401, you'll see that we are currently in planning period 10. Now that could be a week period or it could be a daily period. If you look to the left from period 10, we have been able to identify all of the requirements for the planned work orders, likewise the requirements for the unplanned work orders, and also we were able to total both the planned and unplanned. If we look to the right of period 10, we see that in periods 12, 14, and 16, we have planned requirements. Now, since unplanned requirements are not planned, the only time we can actually record an unplanned requirement is when there is an unplanned requirement for this part, which enters the maintenance planning and scheduling system, and that would be through, let's say, a maintenance work order request. Now, looking at the second record for part number 33-150-05, in this case, we're all the way into planning period 15. Again, to the left of period 15, that is from periods 1 to 14, we've shown all of the planned, the unplanned, and total requirements. But going to the right of planning period 15, the only thing we're showing are the requirements for those planned items. Now, here is the key byproduct of this particular exhibit. When you plan, you look forward. Since 99% of all of our items are purchased, then there is no reason why, as we plan PM in major minor overhauls, we cannot issue purchase orders for those future time periods where those planned requirements are needed. The unplanned looks at history, and since we really can't plan history except through the inventory management program, using such things as order point, economic order quantity, a vendor minimum or a vendor unit package quantity, then we have to rely on the compilation of historical data and project into the future how much we should carry in the storeroom for future unplanned requirements. And this is my sincere recommendation that the way your inventory system should work. You should have a record for the planned item, you should have a record for the unplanned, and you should have a record for the total requirements of both planned and unplanned. Without this document, without the record showing all three, planned, unplanned, and total, you're not going to be able to reduce the inventory investment of the storeroom. If the planning function is done properly, that is, the PMs and the major and minor overhauls are planned properly, at some point in time in the future, and my estimate would be a year to a year and a half, you're going to find that the ratio of planned to unplanned may be 80% planned and 20% unplanned. It could be a plus or minus those percentages. But what that ratio is telling us, that we have the ability to reduce our total inventory investment of spare parts and other related materials by 70, 80, if not more percent. And that's the key byproduct of maintenance work order, planning and scheduling, supported by the planning and scheduling system of both inventory management and purchasing management. And that's one of the key elements that we tried to provide you with in section number 1 of this notebook. Remember, we talked about internal planning and scheduling and external planning and scheduling. Well, here is really the execution of that external planning and scheduling. That is, the inventory management program drives the purchasing management program. Now, Looking to page number 7B, these data elements that are on page 7B and 7C actually have been defined by me when I went through the derivation and how you would read those two item master records. As the first paragraph indicates on page 7B, page 7 indicates the various maintenance work orders that are planned and those that are unplanned, and I think we were able to demonstrate that. The spare parts required for maintenance work orders must show the specific requirements for both planned and unplanned, and that has to be posted to the inventory record. The next paragraph indicates this means that all planned requirements must be recorded in the planned record and unplanned requirements in the unplanned record. And the third paragraph indicates that the inventory record should also have the capability to show the total items required by adding both the planned and unplanned together. And this is specifically what we accomplished when we reviewed the two records on page 7A. Now, moving forward to page 7C, as the first paragraph indicates, that page 7A represents the two individual records showing both planned and unplanned. We've gone through the development of the two item records, which are shown on the second paragraph. And then the third paragraph identifies the total for each of those records, which is the last line marked T, which is the total requirements for both planned and unplanned. And the last paragraph again indicates that the planning record provides the capability to plan spare parts requirements into future time periods. And that's what I've just gone through. That's going to be the input into inventory reduction. The unplanned inventory record can only record unplanned requirements when unplanned requirements are or as they occur. So again, I want you to, as a recommendation, study these four pages, 7, 7A, B, and C. That is the heart to inventory reduction, but it must be supported by the seventh activity in the maintenance management program, and that is maintenance work order planning and scheduling. They get their requirements from item 1, the equipment spare parts list, plus the recommended maintenance requirements, as we have discussed several times so far in this seminar. Now, 7D is really the input into addressing the question, when should I order and how much should I order? And remember, I talked earlier about an inventory ordering matrix. Well, as the first paragraph on page 7D illustrates, that is going to be found on page 9. And again, the second paragraph indicates that ratio that I talked about, 80% planned and 20% unplanned. And I've also included here that 12 to 18 month horizon. The reason for that, it takes about a year to a year and a half, depending on the size of your organization, to install a PM and a major and minor overhaul program. So now moving to page number 8, we want to address the two questions, when should we order and how much should we order? The answers to those two questions is found on page number 9, which is the inventory management ordering matrix that I've alluded to several times. Now, there are 3 answers to when to order. 1, when there is a planned order. 2, when we reach an order point for those unplanned requirements. And 3, when a minimum is reached in a min-max system which supports both planned and unplanned requirements. Now, how much to order for each one of those answers to when to order are shown on the right-hand column under how much to order. For the planned order requirement, there are 5 answers. The first one is order to actual requirements, order to actual requirements plus a yield factor, and I'll explain that in a minute. Order to an economic order quantity, we refer to that as an EOQ, order to a vendor minimum, or order to a vendor unit pack. Now, looking at the order point answer to when to order, we have 3 answers as to how much. Develop an EOQ, which is 1, 2 is the vendor minimum, and 3 is the vendor unit pack. And relative to when to order in a min-max environment, we have 5 answers how much. The first one, we order the max minus the min when the min is 0. The second one is where the min is equal to 1 or more. Then we order the max minus the min plus the deviation that we went below the min at the point of issue. And we do have examples and in the interpretation of both of those particular ordering requirements. The third is we order to a economic order quantity, and the fourth is a vendor minimum, and the fifth is a vendor unit pack. Now, I'm going to hold off on the note for just 1 minute and show you how this ordering matrix is developed. When there is an ordered requirement from planning, you have the option of using the following 2-digit ordering matrix: 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. When we reach an order point, then the ordering matrix, the 2-digit number is 21, 22, or 23. Under a min-max, when to order, we have the ordering matrix of 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35. That's how simple it is. And the note now down at the bottom indicates a shelf life item may change the order quantity. It depends upon how many items you have to purchase and how long they may be in stock. If they are going to be in stock in the storeroom beyond the shelf life code, you're going to have to reduce the order quantity so that the items do not become, let's call them, unusable because the shelf life code has expired. And we'll get into a better derivation of the shelf life code. It's all in your notebook. Now, the next, let's see, 4 pages, starting off on page 10 to page 10C, addresses the development of the inventory management formulas. Now, starting off on page 10 and concluding on page 10C, the next 4 pages will address the various formulas that are an integral part of the inventory management program, and those formulas are an integral part of the inventory management ordering matrix that we just reviewed on page number 9. Starting off with 1, MRP, which is an acronym for Material Requirements Planning, which is something that we have borrowed from operations, which is basically order to order. And that's specifically what number 1 identifies. You order to the actual requirements. Now, 2 is the MRP plus the yield factor, and we're going to go through some illustrations, but the definition of order to order plus the yield factor is to add the yield factor to the work order quantity, which we call gross demand, and therefore the yield factor would have 0 value and what you basically would have to do is to develop the disposition of the yield itself. 3 is the economic order quantity formula, and here again we show the formula. EOQ is equal to the square root of 2AS divided by IC, and in the lower part of this particular exhibit on page 10, we're addressing the data elements. A is the annual usage, S is the purchase order cost if the item is purchased, or the setup cost if the item is manufactured. I is the inventory carrying cost. Now that would be as a percentage. And C is the item unit cost. Now those data elements are all recorded on the inventory record for an item whose ordering quantity is going to be developed utilizing the EOQ application. Now turning to page 10A, the order point, or some people refer to it as I've shown here as ROP, the reorder point, its formula consists of several data elements, and they are: the reorder point is equal to the product of the annual usage times the lead time plus the acronym I made reference to earlier, mean absolute deviation times the safety factor. Now, the data elements are developed as follows. The average usage is actually calculated for that particular item during its lead time. The lead time is the lead time that's used in inventory management. Remember, it's the aggregate lead time. MAD, mean absolute deviation, is calculated. In a moment, we'll show you how MAD is actually calculated with an exhibit. It's in the following sections of this particular exhibit in section number 4. And SF, the safety factor, comes from a set of tables, and those tables, if you want to make a note to yourself, is found on page 27 in section number 4. Now, safety stock, its formula is really the second half of the order point formula. So you'll notice I have safety stock formula is equal to MAD, mean absolute deviation times the safety factor. And again, those data elements are defined the same way that I defined those data elements in item 4 above under the order point system. Now turning to page number 10B, we're going to look at the two different min-max systems. The first one is the min minus the max, and that is the min is the inventory level when to order, and in this case the min is 0, and the max is the level that we're going to order up to. The formula, as indicated, the order quantity is equal to the max minus the min. Now when the min is equal to 1 or more, then the formula as shown at the second half of page number 10B on item number 6, where the order quantity is equal to the maximum minus the minimum plus the deviation below the min. And if you see the data under the min-max, which follows the formula, the min is equal to the inventory level when to order, and the max is equal to order up to the level except when the minimum is greater than 1, and if the material issue brought the inventory level on hand below the minimum, then that deviation below the min is added to the max minus the min quantity. Now continuing on page 10C, we have the definition of the vendor minimum in item number 7, and that is actually established by the vendor. Item number 8 is the definition of the vendor unit pack, and that again is established by the supplier. And item number 9 which is just in time. And I know this it may seem a little strange to have JIT in a maintenance management seminar, but if you can continually plan items and you can institute what we call a vendor certification program, and I made reference to that earlier, and that's a purchasing department responsibility, then you could have material delivered as required. The key is to define what JIT means. Yes, we know it's just in time, but is that time element 1 hour before I need it, 4 hours before I need it, a shift before the item is required, or a day before it's required? As indicated in the definition of JIT, it's identical to MRP, that is without the yield factor, except the time element is smaller than the time element used in the MRP application. Now on the bottom of page 10C is the notation relative to order quantities developed by using any of the above inventory control techniques may have to be altered if the shelf life code that you use for an item that has a shelf life code whose quantity on hand is going to exceed the shelf life code, then the order quantity is going to have to be altered downward. Now, starting off on page number 11 and going to page number 11I, that is a total of 10 pages. We're going to walk you through the formulas with specific illustrations. And these pages from 11 to 11I should be used as training aids, as all of the pages in the seminar should be used as training aids, but these should be training aids relative to how the formula is actually used. Now, starting off on page number 11, we're looking at the MRP plus the yield factor. Now, don't forget, MRP is order-to-order requirements, but here we have an example of where we need 95 feet of special 3-inch aluminum piping. And that is identified by the second paragraph on the page. However, this special piping can only be purchased in 10-foot lengths. So therefore, following the data in paragraph 3, we would have to purchase 100 feet. That is 10 10-foot lengths. That is going to tell me that I'm going to have a fall off or a yield of 5 feet. Now, like I said previously, we want to charge the total value of that order for 100 feet to the planned maintenance work order. That means that the yield factor of 5 feet has 0 value. The thing that you have to develop is the disposition procedure and method for that 5 feet of 3-inch aluminum pipe. Remember, this could be for a special project. You don't know when you're going to use it again, and my advice is to dispose of it. If you continue to retain those yield items and put those in a storeroom, you're going to start to develop a hodgepodge of items that don't have part numbers and that may not have the specific requirements that you need in your maintenance work order and planning and scheduling system. So the last paragraph on page 11 is the development of the application to dispose of the material. Now, before there's any disposition of the material, my advice is to review this example with your financial officer to make certain that there are no financial restrictions in terms of applying the total purchase price of 100 feet to the work order and then developing the disposition of the 5-foot piece. Now moving on to page 11A, we have the EOQ formula, and we've gone through all of the data elements previously, but I have a note on the bottom of this page that all of this information is found on the inventory record. So moving to 11B, we have an example here for you, which includes the following data elements. Annual usage is 135 units. The purchase order cost is $20. The carrying cost is 25%. And C, the unit cost is $6. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve for the EOQ. So item number 1, or step 1, is we actually show the EOQ formula. In this case, we are then going to substitute the data elements for the various items in the formula in step number 1. So step 2 is the formula with the various data elements. Since there are dollar signs in both the numerator and the denominator, the dollar signs will cancel each other out, and the answer will come out in units. So steps 3, 4, and 5 is the continuation of the derivation of the EOQ formula, and in this case, the EOQ is equal to 60 units. Now, I mentioned earlier that I will show you how to develop turnover by individual part number. Looking at the annual usage of 135 and dividing the order quantity into the annual usage, and in this case 135 divided by 60, you could see we're going to have a little over 2 turns a year for this particular example. But remember, 2 turns a year for this example is the most economic way to purchase it. Now, if you turn to page 11C, we're going to walk through an order point or a reorder point example. Up on the top of the page, I've identified the reorder point, and I've also indicated the definition of the various items that are found in the reorder point formula. At the bottom of page 11C is another note indicating that all of this information is coming right from the inventory record. So moving over to page 11D, we are going to use 1 year's worth of history, and we're going to look at monthly usage in this case. So page 11D illustrates the 12 months and shows us the monthly usage by month. Now, again, this usage is summarized in the inventory record on a monthly basis. Now, moving over to page number 11E, we have some other data. In addition to the usage, we have the lead time, which is identified as 2 months. We have a safety factor, which comes from our table of safety factors and service levels. And this is in a notebook. I've made reference to it before. And in this case, for this part number, we want a service level of 95%. The safety factor from the table is 2.06. So the only other data element that we really have to develop is mean absolute deviation. So solving for the reorder point, the first step is to calculate annual usage. Well, we had our 12 months defined, we had our monthly usages defined. If we add that up, that represents a total of 36 units as indicated in step 2. We divide 36 by 12, and we get a monthly average usage of 3 units. Now moving on to page 11F, we want to develop what is known as mean absolute deviation. Mean means average, absolute is without regard to sign, and deviation is the difference between the actual usage and the average usage. So again, what we're doing on page 11F is we've listed our 12 months and we've listed our usages by month. Now what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the average usage. And if you remember from the previous page, the total annual 36 units divided by 12 time periods represents a monthly average usage of 3 units. So here again, we're going to subtract 3 from the actual, but we're not going to worry about the plus or minus signs because absolute is without regard to sign. So in this case, our right-hand column is the differences between actual usage and average usage. Now we want to get the total of that, and if we add that up, or that is the differences, we get a total of 14. Mean is average, mean absolute deviation. So we want to get the average of the differences. So moving on to page number 11G, step number 4, since we have a total deviation of 14 and we have 12 time periods, we divide 14 by 12 and we get the average deviation of 1.17, which is actually MAD, mean absolute deviation. Now, in step 5, I re-enter my formula so I don't make a mistake. Then the data elements are replaced by the actual data that was calculated in the preceding steps. So the reorder point is equal to 3 times 2. That is average usage of 3 times 2 months is the lead time. And we're going to add the MAD, mean absolute deviation, which is 1.17, times the safety factor that came from the table for 95% service level, which is 2.06. So therefore, in the next step, the reorder point is equal to 6 plus 2.41. Now I have a note here for you. Anytime the MAD times the safety factor is in a decimal equivalent, you always round it up. So in this case, we do the rounding, and therefore the reorder point is equal to 6 plus 3, or 9, and that is the order point. Now the safety stock, if you remember, is the mean absolute deviation times the safety factor. So in this case, the safety stock is equal to 3 units, which is in step number 6. Now going to page number 11H, we're going to look at the min-max ordering criteria. And in the first illustration, the minimum is 0 and the max is 4. That's given. So solving for the order quantity, and remember the order quantity is the max minus the min. So we'll put the data elements in there, 4 minus 0. So in this illustration, the order quantity is equal to 4. Now, moving on to page 11I, we have the min-max system where the minimum is 1 or larger, and in this case, the max is 8 and the min is 3. Now, the ordering requirement would be 8 minus 3, but we have to determine at the point of issue, was there any inventory issued that brought us below the minimum of 3? And in this example, we indicated that we had 4 units on hand, so we're above the 3, we're not going to order, but we actually issued 2 out of the storeroom. That brought us 1 below the minimum. We had 4 on hand, we issued 2, we had 2 left. The minimum is 3. So the difference between the balance on hand of 2 and the minimum is 1 unit. So therefore, putting the data into the formula, we have max minus the min, which is 8 minus 3, that difference plus the 1 below the minimum, and therefore the order quantity is 5 plus 1, or 6. So this really concludes the different illustrations of the formulas that are used in the inventory management program, defining the various elements that are found in the inventory management ordering matrix. Now what we're going to do is to move into what we call the ABC analysis, and that is starts on page 12. It is concluded on page 16C. There are 8 pages that we're going to review, which are all encompassing in the development of our ABC analysis. Now, commencing with page 12 relative to our ABC analysis, let me identify what you're looking at and also go through the explanation of the various headings, what they mean, how they were developed, which will give you a fairly good indication as to how the balance of these exhibits, if you remember from page 12 to 16C, are all an integral part of the ABC analysis. First of all, the document that we're looking at on page 12 is called an ABC analysis. Another term for this would be annual usage value analysis. And starting with the headings on the left-hand side, the item number is the part number. Now, most ABC exercises would also include the description and the unit of measure. The next column, going from left to right, is the item card count, and that is developed by actually counting all the items in the analysis. So if we started with the first item and its card count was 1, and then moving consecutively by units of 1s all the way down to the bottom, the last item would be card count 10,988. So in this analysis, there are 10,988 individual part numbers. You'll notice in that second column from the left, the top item is 1, then below it is 13, and the next is 43, and so forth. So this is merely a small sampling of 10,988 different part numbers. Now, the third column from the left is the percentage column, and that percentage column is obtained by taking the total number of items, 10,988, and dividing it into each one of the above numeric item card count. And that gives us the percentage relative to any part number to the total. If we were to go down to part number S6121 as an illustration, that is the 2,198th part number in the listing, starting with the top being 1, and that represents 20% of the part numbers. Now, that's extremely important to understand, because a little later we're going to look at the procedure for this ABC analysis, and the identification of the A, B, and C items is also in the procedure. But the A items generally are referred to as follows. 20% of the part numbers comprise approximately 80% of the annual usage value. So what I have done now up to this point is merely showed you how to at least identify the percentage of the part numbers. And we'll show you how to develop the percentage of the annual usage value in a few moments. Again, continuing to the right, the annual units is another term for annual usage, and that information comes from the individual inventory record cards. The unit cost is the unit cost as we've described before, and that comes from the inventory record card. Now the annual sales dollars, again moving to the right, another term for that is annual usage value. And that column is derived by taking the annual usage, multiplying it by the unit cost, and therefore I get the annual usage value. So for each part number that has had usage on an annual basis multiplied by its unit cost tells us how many dollars of that item we have actually moved out of the storeroom. The next column is cumulative annual usage value, and that is obtained by accumulating the individual annual usage values on a cumulative basis to get the cumulative dollar sales or cumulative annual usage value. And then the last column on the right is derived by taking the total cumulative usage value, and in this case it's a little over $33 million, and we would divide that into each one of the above, and we would get that right-hand column. Now again, moving over to our part number S6121, we said that that represented 20% of the part numbers. Now moving across to the extreme right-hand column, that up to that part we have accumulated 71.6% of the annual usage value. So you could see that 20% of the part numbers in this illustration is not quite 80% of the cumulative annual usage value, but I used the word previously, approximately. So in this case, we have identified the A items, and the B items, as you'll see in a minute, is another 15 to 20% of the cumulative usage value is represented by another 20% of the individual item card count, and those would be the B's and the balance of the C's. Try not to remember that at this point in time, because the procedure and these percentages are defined in this particular section. Now moving on to page 13, I have some homework for you. And someone once said, "I'm from Missouri, show me." The only way that you can actually recognize how some of these techniques and applications are utilized is to go through an illustration. So let me tell you what I want you to do with the following 3 pages. First of all, on page 13, we have 12 part numbers, and those part numbers are identified on the left-hand column. The next column to the right is the annual usage. Again, that comes from the inventory record card. And then we have the unit cost, which again comes from the inventory record card. So here's your homework assignment. You're going to take the annual usage for each item and multiply it by its unit cost. Then you're going to literally record that on the second column from the right, and that column is headed annual usage times unit cost. Another term for that column is annual usage value. Now, once you've gone through your 12 multiplications, then what you're going to do is you're going to peruse up and down that second column from the right and do a ranking based upon the following instructions. The highest annual usage is 1, the next highest annual is 2, and the next highest annual is 3 in descending annual usage value, so that that right-hand column is going to have rankings from 1 to 12. Now, if you turn the page to 14, you have another source document which is part of your homework assignment, And again, starting at the left-hand column, you're going to transfer the part number from page 13 to page 14, but in descending annual usage value. So the first line up on top, right below the heading, will have the highest annual usage value part number, and then consecutively downward until the bottom part number, the 12th part number, is the lowest annual usage value. Then once I have my annual usage values in that second column from the left, then I'm going to run a cum total. So therefore, the first item would have its cumulative annual usage, which actually is equal to the annual usage value. And then you would add the second annual usage value to the previous cum and so forth until you have actually filled out the individual cumulative annual usage values, okay? So you're going to actually go through 12 iterations of developing the cumulative annual usage value. Now what you have to do is to take that total cumulative annual usage value and divide it into each one of the above. So that means there's going to be 11 divisions. And that will provide you with the cumulative percentage, which is the second column from the right. And the last column, which is the right-hand column, is where we're going to record the A, B's, and C's. Now, I don't want you to jump ahead, but the A, B, C parameters are located on page number 16A in item number 8. And that is what you're going to use as the guidelines in developing which items up on top should be the A, which ones should be the B, and the balance, which ones are the C. And then once you've completed that, then if you move to page 15, that is the summary of the ABC exercise, which is ABC analysis. So you're only going to use the top 3 lines in this exhibit, and you're going to, under the left-hand column called classification, you're going to record the first line as A, the next line is B, and the next line is C. The percentage of the items would depend upon how many items are A from page number 15, how many are B, and how many are C. And therefore, you would therefore get the percentage of the items or the part numbers from the A, B, C analysis on the previous page, page number 14. Then what you're going to do is determine the dollars of cumulative annual usage value from page number 14, and that would be the second column from the right. So you're going to have to develop the summary of how many dollars are cumulatively in A, B, and C, and that would be posted in the second column from the right. And then you're going to have the dollar of percentages, and you'll do the same thing, and that dollar of percentage would come from the second column from the right. Now, I think I may have made an error in my analysis for the dollars per classification on 15, and I may have inadvertently said cumulative percentage, where I mean the third column from the right is cumulative annual usage values in dollars, and then the last column on page number 15 would be the cumulative percentage column, which is really the second column from the right. So let me see if I can go back over the instructions. First of all, you're going to go through your annual usage calculation. Then you're going to do the ranking, highest to the lowest. And that, if you remember, is done on page 13. Then on page 14, you're going to record on the left-hand column the part number that has the highest annual usage in descending order to the last part number, which would be the 12th part number, and its lowest annual usage value, which will be recorded on the left column on page 14. The annual usage value in the second column to the right from the part number, again on page 14. You're going to run a cum total. You're going to get the percentages of the cum, and then you're going to determine which parts near the top are A's, then followed by the B's, and followed by the C's, and that would be recorded on page 14 on the right-hand column. And then again, on the third exhibit in your homework assignment, you're going to use the 3 top lines only on page 15. The first line is A, the second line is B, and the third line is C under classification. Then you're going to get the percentage of items. Take the number of parts that are classified as A and divide that by 12. The number that are B, divide that by 12, and the balance that are C, divide that by 12, and you'll get the percentage of items, which is the second column from the left, and then the balance is the dollars per that classification and the percentage of that classification, which are going to come from the third and second to the right columns on page number 14. Now, the procedure for the ABC classification starts on page number 16. Let me just walk you through it. We've already, gone through the process, but here is the procedure in written form for you to review as a review is required. The first step is to take all of the items in the inventory system, that is every inventory record, identify each item by its part number, description, unit of measure, unit cost, and annual usage. Now, once that is completed, you're going to multiply the annual usage by the unit cost. That's the second step. Then the third step is to sort in descending annual usage value. The fourth step is after the sorting has been done, you're going to take the first item and count it as 1, and then you'll continue down incrementally by ones until you count all of the items that are in this analysis. That is, again, step 4. And then what you're going to do is you're going to accumulate the annual usage value, and then step 6 is to divide the cumulative annual usage value, that total, into each one of the above, so you can get the percentage of cumulative usage value. And then going to page 16A, step number 7, you're going to take the total number of items that you have counted and divide that number into each one of the above card count, and you will get the percentage of the items by part number. And now we're ready to go into the derivation of how we classify the A, B, and C items, and that is on item number 8, again on page 16A. The A items are identified as approximately 20% of the part numbers are represented by approximately 80% of the annual usage value. And if you remember in the previous exhibit on page number 12, we indicated that we did not have 80%, it was 71 point some percent, okay? And you don't have to be 100% precise, because those terms approximately means exactly what it indicates. The B items, 20% of the cumulative card count represents another 15 to 20% of the cumulative usage value, and those are identified as B, and the balance of the items are C. Now turning to page 16B, step number 9, considering the ABC classification, we determine the percentage of items in each group, and then we determined the dollar value of inventory represented by each classification, and then we also developed the dollar percentage of each classification. And you'll notice that there's a note at the bottom of page 16B, and it merely indicates that if you wanted to use other alpha characters in addition to A, B, C, what you're really going to have to do is to identify what the parameters are of A, B, C, D, E, F, if you're going to use, let's say, those 6 alpha characters, which are represented in this particular exhibit by page 16A, item 8, okay, where the A items represented 20% of the part numbers, represents approximately 80% of the annual usage value. So you're going to have less than that 20% of the part numbers, and maybe less, 80% of the cumulative usage value, if you elect to go beyond the traditional A, B, C codes. So the key is to develop your own individual classifications and their respective parameters. Now, moving on to page 16C, step number 10, the byproducts of the ABC analysis are as follows. First, reduction of inventory investment by establishing vendor stocking programs. You know what the A items are. You know how many parts are in the A classification. You know what the cumulative annual usage is. If you could have vendors house that material for you at their facility, or you house it in as consigned in, you have the opportunity of reducing your inventory by 70 to 80%, if not more. That is a very important byproduct of the ABC analysis. Secondly, it's the input into cycle counting, and we'll be discussing that in a moment. It also can be used by purchasing to analyze the lead times of critical A, B, and C items. It's also used in some cases as the input into a priority program, where purchase orders and, let's say, manufacturing orders are indicated by part number, what the class code is, A, B, or C. And the concept here is that if I get several orders in and receiving in stores, or I get some manufacturing orders in, process the A items first, then the B's and the C's, and try and get the fastest response to receiving inspection, and then maybe issuing against either planned or unplanned maintenance work orders. Item E is the input into an obsolescence program. Now, anything that has 0 usage and multiplied by its value is going to be at the bottom of the ABC analysis. However, the true indication of obsolescence was covered for you in section number 3. That is the obsolescence procedure. I indicate here in item number E, it's the input into obsolescence, but it does not mean necessarily that it truly is obsolete. Now, on pages 17 to 17F, there are 7 pages that pertain to cycle counting. So if you would turn to page 17, I want to walk you through the procedure, and then we'll look at the development of a cycle counting program for a company, and then you can therefore develop the workload as we are going to define it here, and compare it to the number of items that you have in your inventory to see what that workload would be if you instituted cycle counting. And my recommendation is to consider instituting cycle counting because it is one of the key byproducts, in addition to storeroom security, to give you the highest degree of record accuracy. So let's take a look at the steps in here. Step number 1, you have to process the ABC analysis. Now, right above step 1, I've indicated that the certified public accounting profession has actually approved the cycle counting program relative to replacing the physical inventory. Here again, we and maintenance management must work with our financial department whenever we're going to make a change from physical inventory to cycle counting. There are things that they have to do relative to communicating to your CPA firm, indicating that the transition is going to go from physical inventory to the cycle counting program. Now, step 2, the procedure for the ABC analysis, starts on page number 16. That's merely a cross-reference for you. It's something that we just went through. Once the items are classified into A, B, C in step 3, we are now defining the minimum number of times you must count those parts, either A, B, or C, and this has been established by the CPA profession. So as you can see from 3A, the A items must be counted a minimum of 4 times a year, the B items twice a year, and the C items once a year. So if you turn now to page 17A, I want to continue in our cycle counting procedure. Step number 4 is prior to starting the cycle counting program, you should take a physical inventory. All inventory records should reflect the physical counts. Now, this means that the physical should be done by qualified people in the maintenance department, preferably those that are in the storeroom and may be supported by inventory management and purchasing management personnel. And then step 5 is a key step. Secure the storeroom. If you don't secure the storeroom, forget cycle counting, because it is not going to provide you with that high degree of record accuracy. Then step 6 is make certain that all transactions that are processed in the storeroom are recorded properly in the storeroom record. And the 4 major transactions are receiving, storage, location numbers, issuing, and consolidation. And consolidation is putting 2 or more bin locations into 1. Those are all part of step number 6. Then the cycle counting software will provide a daily printout indicating how many A, B, and C items will be counted each day. On page 17, B, we're going to continue the cycle counting outline, and here we're indicating that the cycle counting form is found on page 17F, and when I get to that document, I'll go through the data. Step 9 is the cycle count quantity is recorded on the cycle count form, and then 10, the cycle count is next compared to the storeroom record quantity, and if there are differences between the two, we may have to recount those items that are outside of the acceptable range of what we call accuracy. So step 11 is identifying the range of accuracy. For the A items, you must be 99.5% with it, which is cycle count to the record, the storeroom record. The B items must be 99.0%, and the C items must be 95.0%. That is cycle count to storeroom record. And again, step 12 indicates that if you are outside the range, then you may have to go back and take the cycle count over again. And continuing now on page 17C, one of the responsibilities of the cycle counters is to determine what caused the errors if errors are found. That's a key byproduct of the training that is required to establish the cycle count program. The byproduct of cycle count errors is to determine what caused the error. Well, if we have a secure storeroom, and if we are recording those 4 transactions that we addressed just a moment ago, the chance of errors should be negligible. But you know, we're human, we're going to make a mistake, and therefore we should try and determine what caused the error and take corrective steps. Step 14 is after count reconciliation. The cycle count form is then forwarded to the financial department because this is really a legal document. Remember, it's replacing those annual physical record cards that you used to take during the physical. And then after the first year of cycle counting, you may want to take another physical, and here you should be right on. You should be close to 100% accuracy, no matter if an item is an A, B, or a C item. The second paragraph from the bottom merely illustrates that the above steps are statements of the cycle counting program, and the cycle counting program should be introduced to the financial department in addition to maintenance management, and I've indicated that before. And there's a final note that we do have another seminar which is entitled How to Organize, Manage, and Control Maintenance Stores, where we likewise address cycle counting in detail. Now, on page 17D, we have developed for you a workload analysis. And let's see if we can address the data elements on page 17D. First of all, starting at the left, we have identified the A, B, and C items. Moving to the right, we have identified the number of A, B, and C items. And we've also totaled the number of parts in this analysis. So for the A items, we have 500 part numbers. On the B, 1,500 part numbers. And the C, we have 3,000 part numbers. And if you add that up, we have a total of 5,000 part numbers. The annual frequency of count, which is the next column to the right, we're going to use the minimum as authorized by the CPA profession. So we're going to take 500 part numbers for A and multiply that by 4. Likewise, 1,500 B items and multiply that by 2. And 3,000 C items and multiply that by 1. And the right-hand column gives us the maximum counts. The A's, we're going to have 2,000 projected maximum counts, 3,000 on the B's and 3,000 on the C's. And if we add those up, we're going to have a projected maximum count of 8,000 counts. Now, remember my term, projected maximum counts. That does not mean we're going to have all these items in the storeroom all the time, and we're actually going to go through 8,000 counts per year. That is merely to give us an indication as to what the maximum count would be. Now, moving to page 17E, we're going to look at the workload analysis. So I have a little formula for you, and it says the daily count is equal to the total annual count divided by the number of working days. Well, the total annual count in this example is 8,000. I'm going to make an assumption we're working 50 weeks out of the year, 5 days a week, and that's where I get the 250 from. So that is going to give us a projected maximum workload per day to count 32 items. And down at the bottom, we go through the same development of the number of A, B, and C items that we're going to count each day. So we take their individual maximum counts from page 17D. And just to give you an illustration, on the A items, we said maximum we could have 2,000 counts. Divide that by 250, and that gives us 8 A items a day. Likewise, 12 B items and 12 C items a day. The workload in terms of the time that it would take has been developed over a period of years working with many different companies, and it goes something like this. If you start off allowing 5 minutes per item to count and to record for the cycle counters each day. That should get you started on a very nice pace. As time goes on, that 5 minutes will probably go down to maybe 2 to 3 minutes. So the maximum time that you're talking about would be 32 items per day maximum times 5 minutes, and that would be 160 minutes per day, or 160 minutes per shift. Divide that by 60, and you could see that you're under 3 hours a day to do the cycle counting. Now, the next page, 17F, is the data that is generally found on a cycle count form. Starting with item 1, we have the part number, then we have the description, we have the unit of measure. Now, item 4 is left blank. That is what the cycle counter will fill in after he or she performs the cycle count in the storeroom. Then we have heading information like the date cycle counted, number 6, the employee that cycle counted, and there may be more than one person. It depends on number of stock keeping units that you have in your storeroom. And then we'll have to record the inventory record card count and determine, is there a variance, if any, the unit cost, the dollar value of variance, and a reason for the variance if you can determine it. And after a while, you should be able to determine that without too much trouble. And then step number 12 is the most important data element, and that is, what corrective action should we take relative to the cycle count program. Now, moving to page number 18, I'm going to go over a list of the additional byproducts of the ABC analysis with you.